ado, thank you again. And I'm going to turn over to start the meeting to Executive Director Willie Janeway. Willie, take it away.
Thank you very much, Diane, and thank you to the staff that are working to put this together. But mostly, thank you to all of you, our members. As Diane has said, we certainly miss gathering under a tent and having food together, but there are advantages to this virtual situation where people can plug in from all over the world. I am Willie Janeway, Executive Director of the Adirondack Council. These are obviously extraordinary times, or we wouldn't be meeting this way by Zoom webinar. We've probably all gotten better at using Zoom. We're still working on that here on this end. We obviously have a global pandemic that is impacting many of us. We have economic shocks rolling around the world. Climate change is still a major threat, the concern of acid rain possibly coming back. Justice crises are rocking us here in the Adirondacks. Thanks to you, all of you, for being part of the Adirondack Council team, we're able to respond to those threats and work to address them. We lost a good friend this last year, Richard Brodsky. He was chair of the Environmental Conservation Committee in the Assembly, COVID-19. I know that almost everyone, probably everyone, has been impacted by this, and our heart goes out to you. No, when this hit, we immediately moved to close our offices and make sure our staff and their families were safe. And then we transitioned back into our work because we heard from a lot of folks that the Adirondacks was more important to them now than it had been ever before. The Adirondacks, people have told us, really is, the landscape that they turn to. A friend, Annette, who had been coming to the Adirondacks for decades, is not with us physically in the Adirondack Park this year for the first time in a long time. But in talking to her a few weeks ago, she was talking about how the park is still her spiritual home and is a place she knows she can depend on. And whether you're back up here now or whether you're going to come back on the other side of the pandemic, know that because you're standing with us, we're working to make sure the Adirondack Park is here and open and welcoming for everybody. Today's plan is to take some time, the first part, and celebrate some of the successes, talk about the state of the park. We have a business meeting as part of our agenda also, and then we'll have some more question and answer opportunity at the end as we go into that. Some of the specific successes I want to share with you that I feel you should be proud of that go directly to our mission of preserving the ecological integrity and wild character of the Adirondack Park, of making sure we have wilderness preserved for current and future generations, making sure we have vibrant, sustainable communities. Some of the successes in the last year: number one, implementation of nation-leading climate legislation that has been moving forward. Number two, the governor's proposed, the legislature has approved a Restore Mother Nature $3 billion bond act that we are working to advance, and we hope be on the ballot for all of you who can vote in New York this November to help communities, to help clean water. That's a major success. Number three, wilderness preservation has always been at the heart of what the Adirondack Council works on, and it's become so popular, especially in the last months with COVID-19, it's at risk of being overrun. Visitor safety is threatened, the resource is threatened, the wilderness experience is threatened. And we have worked, Rocky Geary, our Deputy Director, head of our conservation program, you'll hear more about the work he has done, putting together recommendations with partners that the state is embracing. Some funding was approved by the state to help implement some of those recommendations, to make sure wilderness is preserved for all of us, for future generations, and to make sure it's open equally to everybody, regardless of status, where you're coming from, or anything else. Some other successes that are some of your successes from the last year: invasive species legislation renewed, legislation to address road salt has been advanced. We have a full slate now of the Adirondack Park Agency Board. A year ago we didn't, and although we didn't make some people happy, we worked against a proposal for a partial slate at that time. This year, the governor, the Senate came together, and we applaud them for that, approved a full slate. Not the slate that we would have picked as the council perfectly, not the slate the governor would have picked either. We compromised, we worked together. It's important to have a full slate at the Park Agency, and thank you for giving us the ability to make that happen, whether it be with your commitment of time and letters or with the funding that you provide. Finally, when COVID-19 crisis hit, we scaled up our micro grant program for farms and farmers in the Champlain Valley. That's been a great success the last year. We hope to keep that going strong going forward. I thank you very much. I'm so happy that we're able to connect with you this way. I wish we were all together under a tent, but as Diane said, there are benefits with Adirondack Council advocates in many countries and in all 50 states and the District of Columbia. This lets us connect with all of you. Thank you very much. I look forward to the dialogue that we're going to have today for the next almost hour. Diane, back to you.
Thank you, Willie. Again, this is Diane Fish, Senior Advisor to the Adirondack Council, and I'm just going to help us facilitate, get through the meeting smoothly today. And I just wanted to add my thanks again. We had over 135 people registered for today, and we have close to 100 already signed in, and so hopefully we'll have the full slate of people. Again, supporters from across the United States and the District of Columbia. The park is a national treasure, and it's all of us together that protect the air, water, and wildlands for the future generations that will enjoy this amazing place. There are challenges ahead, no doubt, and so we wanted you next to have an opportunity to hear from Rocky Aguirre, our Deputy Director and Director of Conservation, and Julia Gorin, who is the Director of the Adirondack Council's Long Range Vision 2050 project. So Rocky, I turn it to you.
Great, thank you, Diane. Good afternoon. I'll echo Diane and Willie's welcomes. We're excited to see so many people from so far away, and are remiss that we don't get to actually shake hands and talk in person. It's one of the best parts of our annual meeting. I'm Rocky Aguirre. I'm the Deputy Director and the Conservation Director for the Council. We're going to start this section of the meeting and looking a little bit more closely at a number of the key stewardship issues in particular that staff work on. For myself, that will focus on the work I've been doing with the High Peaks Wilderness Advisory Group. And then we'll hear from Julia Gorin and the work she has been doing overseeing our major vision project. And finally, we'll leave some time at the end to hear from you and answer some questions. So please feel free to put any related questions into the chat or questions and answers section, and we'll try to get to 2 or 3 of those as we have time when we're done with this. So, but before we start this section, I'd like to take a moment to hear from, we would like to take a moment to hear from New York State DEC Commissioner Basil Sagos. So Debbie, if you could key that up.
Hello, everyone. This is Basil Sagos here from the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. I want to welcome everybody to this virtual Forever Wild Day with the Adirondack Council. Congratulations for all the work that the Council does and for all of you do to protect the Adirondacks. What a special place for certainly all of us, special place for New Yorkers. And I think this year we find that it's a wonderful and very important refuge for many people during this coronavirus pandemic. It's been a fairly tumultuous year, to say the least, a challenging year for New York, for the nation, for the world. And, none of us have been immune from this. The fact that we're doing this now virtually as opposed to in person is itself unique. We've experienced these multiple crises at the same time here in the state, with coronavirus going from really the worst situation, which is thankfully now to the best, one of the best, at least in the US, in terms of data. But the coronavirus precipitating the economic fallout that we've now observed, and then of course the racial turmoil that came in the wake of the George Floyd killings. It's very much upended everything that we all do. I think our worldviews have changed significantly. I try to take those kinds of situations and look for reasons for optimism, and I think we can all take that to heart today and every day. First, the realization that government matters. The fact that there are reasons that government exists, the reasons that institutions exist, and we've shown that here in New York. The governor has taken all of state government and ensured that we were protecting our New Yorkers through all the means at our disposal, making their wise choices and making those choices based on science. Science matters, right? Science is not just this ethereal thing, but is in fact something that you can rely upon to make difficult decisions. So science matters, and I think We have all known that at DEC. I'm sure many of you as activists have known that. But we've been making decisions on science for years, and I think now the world is seeing that science is an important driver for public policy. So that's a reason for optimism. And I think the feeling that we can accomplish anything, that's certainly a lesson from 2020 so far, now halfway done, taking the coronavirus curve and frankly smashing it, and doing so with every tool at your disposal. So for us, being part of the governor's response, the state's response to this tumultuous year, has been a very optimistic, leaves us all with a very optimistic feeling like we can address these very incredibly challenging times. So we started the year off with a great message from the governor in the state of the state, direction from the governor in the state of the state on the environment. We had sidetracked with some very significant crises, but now here we are, having not left our work behind, but are now focusing more squarely on that today. Climate change, of course, being the top of the list, as it is for most folks that are in this field, worried about the future, worried about our children's future. And we look back at the Climate Leadership Community Protection Act that we passed last year, and now beginning to implement it gives us all, again, reason for optimism, because now we have these incredible tools at our disposal. Clean water, same thing we've been talking about for years. We need to invest in clean water infrastructure, and that's something certainly that is a major driver as the economy will hopefully recover in short order. We'll look to projects like clean water infrastructure to help get jobs back in and also improve the environment. And of course, the outdoors, which is very much what the council does, and certainly what DEC has always done is protecting open spaces and making them open to all. And there's a real challenge, I believe. There's really two challenges. One, we're seeing incredible visitation. We need to make that sustainable. You're helping us do that through the High Peaks Advisory Group. Thank you. Two is, again, in the wake of this racial turmoil, making sure that our open spaces are available and accessible and welcoming to all. And it was the Central Park birder incident, I think, that began that conversation in earnest. The George Floyd killings really lit a fire under it, and now it's really on all of us to ensure that our open spaces are welcoming, and the trip from someone's house to the open space is also welcoming. So I'd put that as a challenge really to the council, and frankly, I put that as a challenge to myself and my staff, that we need to do everything we can to ensure we address systemic racism, and that's definitely a concern nationwide, certainly in New York and the Adirondacks and elsewhere. When you talk about the inequities that must be addressed. So that in 2020, if any good comes out of 2020, it's a real discussion about that major issue, and we should all be rolling up our sleeves, listening, learning, acting as aggressively as possible. I wish you a good year. Council and DEC go way back. We don't always agree. We actually predate Willie Janeway's tenure at the council. Willie used to be Region 3 director, and now he's up there with you all. But we're glad about that. He's a good partner and a good friend. But we have lots to work on with the Adirondacks. Lots to work on together. It's an important mission that you have, and certainly that we do as well, to make sure that this incredible park remains not only protected, not only wild and with rich habitat and as a haven for things like species during climate change, but is also a place where people can live and make a future and build businesses and remain happy. So it's a big challenge for all of us. I know we can do it, and I know you can as well. So be safe. I hope to see you all soon. Wear a mask. In the meantime, it actually matters. Thank you.
Generous words. Even when technology isn't always helpful, I think the commissioner's words at least came through strong and clear, and that's really what is important. We certainly at the council appreciate the remarks from the commissioner, and not just that, the dedication that he and Governor Cuomo have shown during this unprecedented time. For those that don't know, Commissioner Sagos and the DEC have been leaders in the state effort to flatten the curve and manage the response to the COVID-19 pandemic. They have really truly been doing heroic work, and often with little visibility or public awareness for their efforts, and truly should be commended for that. I'd also like to acknowledge the Commissioner's commitment to the Adirondacks and public lands across New York State, as we see a huge surge in the use of our public lands during this time. And as a member of the Commissioner's High Peaks Wilderness Advisory Group, I've been part of the effort to address overuse and natural resource impacts across the region. And I have just seen how committed the Commissioner and his senior staff are to this issue. And the same really could also be said for other state agencies as well. Members of the Office of Parks and Rec, the Department of Transportation, the APA, senior members of those organizations have been a part of this, the advisory group since the beginning, and it really has been a collaborative effort. As many of you know, the High Peaks are at the forefront of a larger public lands popularity contest, along with other high visitation areas across the country, including our sister forest preserve down in the Catskills, the nearby White and Green Mountains in Vermont, Baxter State Park in Maine. All these places, along with the High Peaks, are dealing with record numbers of users, especially now during the pandemic. It's been a really interesting thing to witness and to be working on during this particular time. And this is really at the heart of the work the advisory committee has been tasked by the Commissioner to solve. And frankly, as someone who's worked on these issues for over 25 years, it's a super complex and challenging problem. Overuse is not new to the High Peaks. I studied many of these same issues in college back in the mid-90s, or to the Forest Preserve in general, but it has certainly grown in significant ways over the past few years, particularly along the Route 73 Keene to Lake Placid corridor. For those that have been in this area lately, you will have noticed lines of parked cars, flashing billboards, asking visitors to avoid crowded trails and crowded trailheads, and lots of people waiting to get gas at Stewart's. The sheer number of visitors has stressed much of the front country infrastructure for many of these gateway communities. And as a resident of Keene, I can tell you that those gas lines at Stewart's are only getting longer. So if that's one indication, it certainly is a clear one for me. And farther from the road, the numbers of users has only increased impacts to popular trails and really has affected many of the wildlands that are the draw, and wilderness lands in particular, that are a draw for so many people that are coming this way in the first place. And along with that, we're also seeing all of these related spikes in public safety problems, particularly as emergency response rates grow by understaffed rangers and community rescue volunteers. And it's a real indicator of the larger issue. And this was the patchwork of stewardship issues facing the advisory committee when we began our work in December. Through a pandemic and now through larger social justice unrest, we've been working to release an initial report focusing on just short-term recommendations. That became the initial goal of the group. And that was an area where state and partners could begin addressing needs immediately this summer. These recommendations include ways to enforce parking restrictions, how to provide sanitary human waste management, i.e. porta-johns at trailheads, ways to improve a regional shuttle system, including options for electric powered vehicles, a very important part to what we've been working on. A major emphasis has been on leave no trace recommendations that are part of a report that the Adirondack Mountain Club and the council have worked on. A maintenance assessment of high peak trunk trails. This is a major effort to begin collecting data and visitor information that will be instrumental in helping us make long-term management decisions. And there's also a recommendation on a pilot program on private lands to begin addressing wilderness and trail capacity limits and just how those are affecting the natural resources, especially in that 73 corridor. And these short-term recommendations are only a starting point to address the most critical natural resource protection needs and public safety concerns. The hope is that a report capturing long-term objectives that will spell out a long-term recommendation and plan that will come out really looking at a new kind of management paradigm. We expect that to be out by the end of the summer or early fall. And the intent of this long-term report is to revision how land management in the High Peaks and other areas, not just in the Forest Preserve, but potentially across the state, how natural resources protection is conducted and management is conducted using more modern land management techniques. And as we begin to look to the future, I think this is a great transition point to the work that Julia Gorin, who's the project director for the Council's Vision Project, to pass to her as she really starts to look at these issues from a macro perspective and how the council will be working on these things long term. So Julie, I pass to you.
Thank you, Rocky. As Rocky mentioned, my name is Julia Gorin, and I am the director of the Vision 2050 project. And as important as this work that Rocky mentioned with the High Peaks Strategic Planning Group is, it focuses right now on the pressing needs of this moment. And at the same time, there is still a need for long-range comprehensive planning to look ahead to the future of the Adirondacks, not just the stewardship of our public lands, but thinking about the park as a whole. So for those of you who may be unfamiliar with it, Vision 2050 is a long-range strategic plan for the Adirondack Park. And it grew out of the success of the original Vision 2020 series, which I'm sure many of you remember, which were published starting in the late 1980s. Vision 2020 addressed a particular need, the protection of important biological communities, wilderness, and recreational opportunities from development. This project created a roadmap that could be followed in acquisition of key parcels, and it was a tremendous success. Today's challenges, however, are of a different nature, whether we're talking about climate change or overuse, pollution of water from road salt and other sources, struggling communities that are not perceived as welcoming to visitors or to new residents. And these challenges create an opportunity for a new kind of plan, a long-range vision that could be driven by science, developed in consultation with experts and stakeholders, and that can really serve as a new map to guide the council's work over the next 30 years to a brighter future. So this project addresses 3 key areas: preserving natural communities, fostering vibrant human communities, and managing the park. We have been and will continue to conduct research, engage with outside experts and board members, and engage with people in a series of charrettes to create a vision for the future. And of course, to arrive at a better future, we also have to work in the present. And one example of that is the stewardship of public lands. Prior to the formation of the advisory group that Rocky mentioned, the council partnered with the Adirondack Mountain Club and brought in the international expertise of the Leave No Trace Center for Outdoor Ethics, the Adirondack Park. I know Rocky mentioned these recommendations, and I wanted to just mention how they came to be. When Leave No Trace came in, it came in to conduct an assessment and make recommendations on how to use education to reduce impacts to our public lands and waters. So Ben Lawhon from the center conducted a survey first about the most significant impacts prior to a site visit in September. During that 4-day visit, we crossed the Adirondack Park, visiting sites from Lake George to Old Forge and back. We met with the DEC, the APA, and an entire alphabet soup of stakeholders on our public lands. And I will say, during that visit, on an absolutely stunning Saturday in September, we took a morning hike out to Marcy Dam. And it was the most crowded I had ever seen it. Ben took a look at this, took a look at the crowds and declared, "This is overuse as bad as I've seen it anywhere in the country." Now, personally, while I always think the Adirondack Park is equal to any national park in beauty, it was really disturbing to me to think of us as experiencing some of the worst overuse equal to the highest used national parks as well. The challenge is real, but the solutions are as well. So the result of that research and visit was a report with 52 specific recommendations, and I see that folks have posted a link to those recommendations in the chat, so I encourage you to check them out. Those recommendations range from infrastructure to staffing to digital education. And one of the things that I'm really proud of is that several of these recommendations have already been enacted or are underway. When the High Peaks Strategic Advisory Group was formed and began discussing strategies to address overuse, these recommendations were an obvious resource to share, and ultimately they were adopted by the group both in the short term and as an influence on long-range planning. While these recommendations and this work, the recommendations on this work don't stop today, and they certainly don't stop at the High Peaks. We must continue to think comprehensively and holistically in order to have an Adirondack Park in 2050 that lives up to its promise. As with the Vision 2020, getting there requires partnership, requires collaboration, and it requires the support of council members and friends like you. We look forward to your participation and to hearing your voice in this process. And now we'll open it up for some questions.
Thank Thank you, Julia and Rocky. I see one question that has a couple of questions in it, which other people probably have too, which is, how might the economic impact from lower numbers of tourists due to COVID have an impact on the budgets of municipalities? And do we think residents are okay with lower numbers and because of their own personal safety, even though there have been negative effects on businesses? And is tourism being discouraged? So a bunch of questions, you get the idea.
Yeah, so those are great points, and it's something that I've answered even within my own family who live farther abroad, that there's a sense that we'll have less people come because of COVID and the pandemic. And we're actually finding the reverse to be true, that with all that's going on and the need for folks and the want to get out and be in open space, that our numbers here are on par with what we see in an average summer. And what makes that extraordinary is that the Canadian border is still closed and they make up 40% of our visitation. So if the Canadian border was open and we were having just our normal 40% additional visitation, we would be at over half again as many people as we normally would see. So we are seeing an unprecedented use right now that is challenging for a lot of front country infrastructure, for communities. Businesses are struggling because they have been shut down. They were put on pause. As things slowly come back on, we're still trying to figure out the economic impacts. But it's not because the people aren't coming. They are certainly here. Julie, I don't know if you had more to add to that.
Just one piece that I'll add is that the Regional Office of Sustainable Tourism conducted a survey of local residents about their comfort with seeing tourists come back to the area, and that was it was about 50-50, slightly greater, slightly over 50% were more comfortable with people starting to come back, and I do think there's been a lot of really good education locally to make sure that folks are coming back but doing so safely.
Julia, a related question is, do we have data on where the people are coming from?
So that's an excellent question, and it's one of the top needs that the advisory group has flagged. We do have some data from Roost and other organizations that work in the tourism field, but not enough to really help us fine-tune our outreach and our education and sort of that overuse stewardship education piece. I will say just an incidental impact. So Roost is a very important player up here. They're very involved in the tourism component. They are almost entirely funded by revenue that comes in from taxes associated with lodging. They've had to actually downsize their staff in significant ways because there have not been anybody staying in hotels. So the ripple effects of all of this is really something that's is posing new challenges across the board for organizations as well as municipalities.
Thanks, and maybe we have time for one more question, and then there'll be more question and answer opportunities at the end, which is, has anyone in the interest of attracting year-round residents and diversifying the park thought about attracting refugees?
Yeah, so that's a great question as well. And Julie, if you have more to add to this, I'll just throw in briefly that this has been a part of a discussion that the council has been involved in, and that more importantly, the communities have been involved in for at least the 7 years that I've been here. Keene in particular has looked at a number of those issues. They're a part of a larger discussion that we engage through the Adirondack Diversity Initiative and our partner organizations there. But like everything, this is just such a complex and large issue. And it's about not just bringing people here, but making sure that this place is safe and welcoming for the people that we do get to come here. So multi-pronged, multi-complexity, things that we are engaged on, no easy answers.
Thank you. So we're going to need to move on now, but again, there'll be more questions and answers later, or feel free to put your questions in the chat. So Rocky, I turn it back to you, or to transition.
Great. So we do thank everybody for their questions and their input. It's one of the great parts of having these sort of virtual forums, is that there's just more of a direct link to questions. And moving on, we do have some more messages from some really key decision makers, Senator Kamitsky and Assemblyman Engelbright. who are chairs of their respective environmental conservation committees in the New York legislature. So I think we're going to start and move from this segment into listening from Senator Kaminsky and Assemblywoman Engelbright. Debbie?
Hi, I'm Senator Todd Kaminsky, and I have the privilege of chairing the Senate's Environmental Conservation Committee, where I get to, in some small part, help advance the Adirondacks, the crown jewel of New York. And I want to thank you for all you've done to push us and everyone at Albany to help make the Adirondacks better and to preserve the natural resources which should be the envy of the world. We've gotten to do some good things in these last few years, but there's a lot more to do. Whether it was passing landmark climate legislation, making sure that tens of millions of dollars from the Environmental Protection Fund go toward water projects in the Adirondacks, programs to rid invasive species which are so problematic. And I did get to do my own boat washing last year, which was quite an experience. And of course, now getting a balanced APA slate in, which will have tremendous ramifications going forward. Proud of all we could do together, and it's just the beginning. So you please keep up your advocacy. I'll do my best to live up to my end of the bargain, and together we can help bring the Adirondacks to the next level. Thank you so much.
Greetings, everyone. My name is Kevin Schlatt. I'm the Director of Government Relations for the Adirondack Council. It's my honor to introduce Assemblyman Steve Engelbright, who serves as Chair of the Committee on Environmental Conservation. Hello, Chairman, and thank you for joining us.
Hi, Kevin. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Well, we all know, I know personally that you're no stranger to the Adirondack Park, so would you please share with our viewers what the Adirondacks mean to you?
Well, the Adirondacks is the high ground of our state in several ways. In actual elevation, in the oldest rocks, it's the wellspring of the waters of our greatest rivers. It is 1 out of every 5 acres of our state, and it is an internationally acclaimed ecosystem. It is the state's greatest treasure. I respect the ecology and the geology of the Adirondacks, the history and the people. And today I have a chance through you, thank you, to talk to some of the advocates who guard this treasure and protect it as we do in partnership for the people of the state.
Thank you. The legislature has made historic progress in the last year when it comes to preserving our environment. Could you please share with our viewers what you consider to be the most meaningful of those accomplishments?
I'd be happy to. The greatest accomplishment, I believe, in the environmental area is our Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. Senator Kaminsky and I worked very diligently to bring that through a perilous passage. And with the support of the Adirondack Council and many other organizations around the state who acted as validators of this initiative, we were able to bring it to the governor's desk. And we had a ceremony in Midtown Manhattan almost a year ago now that had Vice President Gore to help us memorialize our best effort to protect New York from the ravages of global warming and the subtle but terrible impact of greenhouse gas emissions that are changing the water chemistry of our rain, of our ocean, and ultimately impacting our terrestrial ecosystems such as the Great Adirondack Park. I just want to say thank you. Thank you for your leadership and thank you for your members for supporting and being there to enable you. You're so very important. If we didn't have you to rely upon to help give us guidance for protecting the Adirondacks, we'd have to invent you. But you are there, and we're grateful.
Well, Chairman, thank you so much for those kind words, but most of all, thank you for your leadership and preserving clean water, wildlife, and wilderness that all support community vibrancy in the Adirondacks. So we just want to take a moment to especially express our gratitude. So thank you, Chairman.
So thank you again to Senator Kaminsky and Assemblyman Engelbright, and apologies for the stuttery video, but hopefully you could just listen and that came through loud and clear, which is most important. So we thank them for taking their time to create the videos for us, and for also the great partnership and all the work that they're doing for the Adirondacks. So continue to put your question and answers in the chat, and we will try and get to some of those later on. Again, thank you all for being here. And next we're going to turn it over to Board Chair Michael Beckman for the start of the official part of the member meeting. Thank you. Just give us 1 sec while we transition. Okay.
Thank you, Diane. This is the start of the official members meeting. I'm Michael Beckman. I have the great honor of being the current board chair of the Adirondack Council. In that position, I welcome you to our annual members meeting with the attendant business that we have to conduct. Before getting to that, I want to say just a few words. The Council is a major contributor to and a force in the Adirondacks, which you all recognize by your presence here today and by your ongoing support. We would all rather be meeting in person, but that is obviously not wise given the current state of the pandemic. We are all faced with new and serious challenges, and we still have to deal with the usual concerns that haven't gone away, as you've heard. The work of the Council is certainly not getting any less or any easier in these difficult times. The Council continues to grow in impact and effectiveness, as well as in size and reach, as you heard echoed in the statements from Commissioner Sagos and Assemblyman and Senator Kaminsky and our other guests. All of you are part of this growth and importance. Speaking for the board, we recognize and truly appreciate your support and look forward to working with you and hopefully to meeting in person next year. I'd like to now introduce Dan Reiterband, who's the treasurer of the council, to present the preliminary 2020 financial report.
Okay, looks like my audio and video should be operating. Hope everyone can see and hear me. Hi everyone, my name is Dan Reiterband. I'm council board member and treasurer, and I'm here to present the financial report for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2020. In the midst of a financial and health pandemic, few organizations would have the good fortune to be able to report on good financial news. Fortunately, I have some to share today, and I'm pleased to do that. For a variety of reasons, including generous contributions by donors over the past few months, very important, careful expense control by management, equally important, and the fact that only 1/4 of our most recently completed fiscal year was affected by the pandemic. The council actually finished the fiscal year with a stronger balance sheet and more cash on hand than we had at the same time last year. So that's the good news. The challenge, however, is that we must plan on the crisis now impacting all 4 quarters, not just 1 quarter of fiscal 21, which began on July 1st. And this is at a time, as mentioned by others, when the demand and need for a well-preserved park is more acute than ever, and the protections afforded the park are under attack. So let me share some financial highlights for the year for everybody's benefit. So first and foremost, many generous donors stepped up and continued or increased their giving over the course of the last several months. Importantly, as I mentioned before, staff eliminated or delayed some expenses that had been budgeted to conserve cash. That was approximately $100,000 worth of money budgeted but not spent. In fiscal 20, we had $2.3 million in revenue, including about $204,000 in pledges that are payable over the next 5 years. So those are revenues counted, but dollars not yet received, plus approximately $180,000 in new Forever Wild Fund gifts, including realized bequests, and then an additional $10,000 in final capital campaign pledge payments that were made by those who had pledged dollars over an extended period of time. The $2.3 million for fiscal 20 compares to $1.9 million for the preceding year. So all good news. When excluding the pledges received but not yet paid, as I mentioned before, of $204,000, but including the 5% budgeted transfer that we have from the Forever Wild Fund of $298,000, we had a total of $2.4 million available for fiscal year 20 annual programming. Expenses for the year were $100,000 less than the budgeted $2.4 million. So there was a $100,000 difference between the cash we had available and what we spent. And again, those reductions were due to cost reductions that were implemented during the last fiscal quarter in response to the uncertainty of the pandemic. Importantly, we ended the year with approximately $600,000 in cash. That compares to $460,000 in cash that we had in the preceding fiscal year. And last, but certainly not least, the Council's Forever Wild Fund now stands at $6.06 million compared to $6.25 million on June 30th, 2019. So notwithstanding all of the financial market volatility and the uncertainty associated with the last 3 months of the fiscal year, we're almost flat in the Forever Wild Fund year over year. So that's all good news. What we don't know, obviously, is what will happen over the course of the next 6 to 12 months. And as a result, we've adopted a conservative budget for fiscal 21. We formed an extended finance committee, and board leadership and staff are reviewing finances monthly as opposed to quarterly, and will propose potential adjustments to our board approved budget, either up or down as the circumstances evolve over the next 6, 9, and 12 months. In closing, I'd like to state that the park and the council are very fortunate to be the recipients of such generous support. We obviously have a terrific staff, and I'm very pleased to be able to report that we've retained everyone during the pandemic. So we have all of our team intact, ensuring that the council can continue to do all of the important work that's underway. I want to thank everybody. And in closure, I would move the adoption of the financial report in the minutes and pass it back to you, Chair Beckman.
Thank you, Dan. I think that thank you for that very encouraging, albeit cautionary report, and for highlighting both the support that we get from you, our members, and for the extraordinary work of our staff, some of whom you've met, and I'm sure you are equally impressed as all of us on the board are. Dan has moved for approval of the minutes of the July 13th, 2019 members meeting, as well as for this current fiscal year 19 to 20 financial report. And I'd like to call on Diane to activate the poll and ask all of you to approve both of these.
So Debbie, thank you, has posted the poll. And just a reminder for people on the phone, I'm so sorry, but you're not able to vote on the poll, but we have people weighing in, so we'll give people a few minutes. 60%, 70%.
And we should note that there are 135 people had posted proxies ahead of time.
Actually, we had 135 registered to attend, 350 proxies and email write-ins ahead of time, which is great.
Thank you.
I think that's probably, I see things have slowed down, so I think we're good. That's with 100% of people voting yes, Michael, so.
Terrific.
Thank
I'll
you,
take that as a compliment to the treasurer's report.
Debbie.
Exactly. Couldn't have done it without that. Thank you all. This morning, moving on to another topic, the board met this morning and voted to adopt resolutions for 4 departing board members, thanking them for their exemplary service to the Adirondack Council and specifically to the board. These are Jill Byer, Lee Payne Hyatt, Kevin McNulty, and Meredith Prime. I'd like to now call on Ann Carmel, who's chair of our Board Development Committee, to present a motion to approve the election of this year's candidates for the board. Ann?
Okay. Thank you for being with us, and thank you, Michael, and thank you for the directors who have stepped down. We're fortunate to have a good group of people continuing the service and 5 people either returning or coming back onto the board. So for re-election to a second term, we would like to propose Emily Bateson, David Bronston, Doug Stewart. For re-election to a third term, we are proposing Charlie Canham and Bob Kafin, and scheduled to rotate off the board but continues to serve through her term as vice chair is Laurel Skarbinski. And then for election as new board members, we have Mary Bajor, Rush Holt, Jerry Page, and Justin Potter, who is returning to the board after a brief time off the board. So I'd like to...
And I'm not sure you mentioned Eric Lawson.
You're right. I apologize. And Eric Lawson. I apologize. So we are putting up a poll to
So people should be seeing the poll to be able to take a vote on the board members. So you have a choice of either accepting the full slate or you can vote individually for the board members. Those to be re-elected and those to be elected. There's also, if you'd rather not vote, you can say withhold my vote, but you have to select something in order to submit the poll. So again, we'll give people a few minutes to look at those. And we have people today voting plus the 350 mail-in ballots that we received. So thank you. We'll give a second, Ann.
do we have the vote in yet, Diane?
Getting there, we're getting close.
Okay.
About
It's a cliffhanger.
it's a cliffhanger. 72 people are still voting, so we'll give people another minute or two. Okay, I think that should do it, Deb. Okay, and the 100% full acceptance of the slate. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ann, and thank you all for voting. Based on the mailed and email ballots and the proxies received and the results of this poll, I declare this slate elected. And thank you all for your support. This is really the conclusion of the official members meeting, and we will in a second move on to opportunity for question and answer with our executive director, Willie Janeway. I want to just reiterate that I'm truly honored to be allowed to serve as chair of this distinguished and effective board and of this really wonderful organization. The council is faced with many challenges thanks to our committed volunteers, including all of you, and thanks to our superb staff and staff leadership. We're really an exemplary and very effective organization, and we're particularly needed in these very difficult, changing times. None of the old challenges that we've had to face have gone away or even been fully solved. Some of the legal challenges, clean water, some of the clean air challenges with forestry, and obviously challenged with climate change and overuse, as you've heard. And yet we now have to deal with the new changes, such as economic concerns and health concerns, particularly with visitors coming in from outside the area and with our small but aging and relatively at-risk year-round population in the Adirondacks. So the work of the council gets more and more complex, and we truly appreciate and need all of your support for this important work for this unique place. And with that, I thank you, and we'll turn it over to Diane and to Willie for a question and answer from all of you.
Willie, one question is, can you comment on some of the lawsuits that are happening at the federal level related to acid rain and clean air?
Yes, Diane, and thanks for anyone or those who have asked that question. Adirondack Council has 2 lawsuits we're party to right now, one with Maryland, Delaware, Chesapeake Bay Foundation, Environmental Defense Fund, the other with the state of New York, trying to ensure enforcement of the good neighbor rule, where upwind states are not allowed under the Clean Air Act to cause violations of clean air standards in downwind states like New York and Delaware, New Jersey. So we've had some success. We've also had some setbacks on that. I thank our national partners for working with us. They appreciate having a local regional organization with the ability we have to work with us. So in addition to working in the court on those federal cases, we are also working with our congressional delegation on both budget and legislative options with eyes both on the short term and the long term. We won, with many of you standing with us, a victory against acid rain, and now we see some signs of backsliding, and we're determined to make sure that doesn't come back. Thank you, Diane. Thank you to the questioner.
Thank you. Someone mentioned, Diane mentioned just thanking us for working with EDF on some of those lawsuits. So thank you for that. I know that someone mentioned the road salt. Can you give an update on what's happening with the important issue of road salt contamination?
Some of us have started to think of, and others have called road salt a new acid rain threat to our waters here in the Adirondacks. It's gotten to the point where some of the readings in certain waters go down in the summer, or excuse me, go up, where the level of salt contamination in the water is higher in the summer, which made some scratch heads until it made people realize with some additional research that in places the groundwater is being contaminated, drinking water is being contaminated. So as with so many things, Adirondack Council is teaming up, in this case with local government, with 80K Action, other environmental and community groups. We've taken the lead in Albany on the legislation that is bipartisan and has sponsors, identical legislation in the Senate and the Assembly. A shout out to our John Sheehan on the acid rain work. Shout out to Kevin Shalad, Lee Keat on the board for the work on road salt. We aren't giving up on that. The legislature comes back July 20th. And thank you to all who've responded to the action alert to send in those letters. Kevin heard immediately. I think we had 500 or 600 letters going in. No other organization is able to generate that much. But what's good is it's not just our organization, it's others also weighing in. The members have heard that. They feel what some might call the pressure, what I would call the encouragement to do the right thing and pass that legislation before the end of the month.
Nice, thank you. Peter Payne is asking, over the long term, in terms of overuse in certain areas of the park, do we not have to come to some form of a permit system?
Peter, greetings to you. As you know, but for those who don't, more than 20 years ago, it was recognized that there were limits to the capacity of some areas in the Adirondacks, while other areas had a lot of underused capacity. So wilderness resource capacity limits exist that have been written into some of the plans for the most popular areas in the Adirondack Park for more than 20 years, but they have not been enforced. So the Adirondack Council has collected data, found that we are over 200% above that capacity in places. And yes, that means if we're going to protect that wilderness resource for everybody and for future generations, we have to figure out how everybody can enjoy the park and more people can without loving it to death. A friend said, hey, 25 people, 2,500 people can climb Lower Wolfjaw. but they can't all do it on the same Saturday in August, or it's not going to be wilderness, it'll be permanently degraded. And so some sort of permit system, whether it be through permits for parking or shuttles, are probably part of the solution. The Adirondack Council supports that, but only if it's done as part of a solution that includes more education, more trail work, more rangers, more funding. And back to Rocky's comments and work with Julia on the High Peaks Advisory Group, there's a comprehensive set of recommendations now on the table. Kaminsky and Engelbright helped make sure there was some funding in the state budget to move forward on this. And only by putting those systems in place, including some permits some places, will we be able to actually address the equity issue and make sure, regardless of whether you live near a trailhead up here year-round or seasonally, or whether you're driving from New York City, you have the same equal opportunity to reserve a spot. It would work best if it's combined with some first come, first serve, some reservation system. So we are advocating for that. Peter, thank you for your support.
Thank you, Willie. Michael, did you want to respond to Lorraine's comment? I saw a note that said Michael would like to answer. Oops, you're on mute, Michael. Are you there?
Yeah, sorry, it just wasn't. She made a point that she's very glad, having been a constituent of Rush Holt's in New Jersey, that Rush Holt has joined our board. And I just wanted to comment, so are we. We are very excited to have Rush as part of our team.
Thank you. Willie, Mark Granger, thank you, Mark, from the Scroon Lake Association said, what are we doing to make sure the state honors grants awarded but not yet paid?
Mark, that's a great question. We put so much effort into making sure legislation and policy are put in place, that funding is put in place, and often it's tempting to then, after the ribbon cutting and the press release, to go on to the next crisis. But one of the things I really enjoy about being part of the leadership of and such a strong organization as the council, we have the capacity to do multiple things at once, to follow up, and with your help, put pressure on elected officials that they don't get credit if they don't follow through. As Basil Sago said, we work together on a lot of things, but we don't always agree on everything. And part of what we at the council do is turn up the heat and make sure they know there's a lot of opportunity for love for them if they follow through. And we'll make it clear to the public. Folks know our annual state of the park. Thumbs up, thumbs down. Unbiased, we call it like it is. And people know that's coming out. And if they don't follow through, we will call folks out on that. Mark, thank you for your help on multiple projects you work with us on, not just invasive species.
Thank you. Willie, David Bronston is asking how the development and use of Boreas ponds is coming along, and is it taking some of the pressure off the high peaks from the northern entrances?
Thank goodness so many of you stood with the Adirondack Council, and Michael, let us know if you want to jump in here too and help make sure that the Boreas ponds are protected as wilderness. With the level of use going on in there, I've been in there, I've seen the parking lot already overflowing, and going back to Peter Payne's question, if it's overused, it degrades the very wildernesses we're trying to protect. And then if someone goes there, they're not going to experience wilderness. I was in near that area paddling just a couple weeks ago, and I saw a pair of bald eagles. The eagles are back. The peregrine falcons are back. We've expanded the wilderness in the Adirondacks, including Boreas ponds. We've also expanded the total number of people coming and visiting these wilderness areas, and that's all good. So far things look good at Boreas ponds. The road and driving access is a little closer than some of us in the council would have liked. And so we're keeping an eye on that so we can call things out. I will also point out, I went in there on a day off to check on things, but mostly just to get back in there because it's so beautiful. And I go in, I sit in the new lean-to, I take a picture, it's great. And then I hear heavy machinery. Okay, back into work mode. I better go see what the heck's going on. This isn't supposed to be going on. And I hike in about a half mile around the lakes, and there's an excavator in there. And actually it's pulling out the old culverts and restoring some of the roads. So I took a picture and gave DEC a big applause and thumbs up for that. That's some of the progress restoring the wilderness at the Boreas ponds. Couldn't happen without all of you speaking up, participating, lending your time. Those who can writing checks, those who can't doing whatever you can. Boreas ponds is better protected now than it's ever been before, and it's open to the public.
Thank you, Willie. It's 2 o'clock, but we have 2 more questions. And so I think if we could answer those 2, that would be great. But first, a shout out, Willie, from John Schuler, the manager. I hope I got that right. The manager, right, of the Adirondack Mountain Reserve, the Ausable Club, saying thank you for all of your support of the Adirondack Mountain Reserve. We've enjoyed continuing our partnership with the council. So, and thank you, John, for all the work you're doing to help manage all the visitors that come through the Ausable Club. So two quick things, but they aren't going to be quick, Willie, so I don't know how you're going to do this quickly. Jeffrey Levitt is asking, there were lawsuits on tree cutting and snowmobile connector trails. What's going on? And then could you just say a couple words about the Adirondack Diversity Initiative? And then we'll wrap up.
On the lawsuits, the Adirondack Council was involved in some lawsuits maybe 10 years ago on this issue. We lost a few rounds. Another organization, Protect the Adirondack, stepped in. They lost some rounds. They have now won. These questions are now going to the highest court in New York, the Court of Appeals. And our board has authorized the Adirondack Council being a party to that to make sure that the state honors the limits in the Constitution on how much tree cutting can go on. I know we're not in the same position as some of the folks at the state on that, but the board has authorized that. We recognize some limited cutting for very limited purposes has always been allowed, and we would support that. But removing those limits is something that our council has opposed, and our board has authorized that. On the question of diversity, I think of our former board member, our friend Jim Sonneborn, who, when I started at the council 6 or 7 years ago, he said, this looks like too white a group. What are you doing on diversity? And since then, we co-founded the Adirondack Diversity Initiative, and not by ourselves, but again, working with others, Adirondack Foundation, the Adirondack Experience, the Wild Center, John Brown Lives. I'm gonna get in trouble. I start naming groups and I can't name them all. A real team of folks has come together. Rocky has been a leader on that. We have donors who have provided money for that. And this is not a problem for people who aren't white. It is a problem for those of us who have some privilege, who have some opportunity. It's a problem for us to make sure the park is welcoming and inclusive for everybody. The racial injustice is one of the things, like climate change and other factors, that do threaten the future of this park. So the Adirondack Council and our board has identified actions we're taking, and we're looking to identify more. We realize we are not an expert in this area, so we will be teaming with others, but this is an important issue to make sure the park is welcoming and inclusive to everybody. And acknowledging this is about race, but it's also about religion. It's about economic status. It's about gender. It's about sexual orientation and identity. The Adirondack Park should be welcoming and inclusive to everyone. It is a global treasure. It wouldn't be if it weren't for all of you. I'm really proud of the work that we have all done together in the last 6 years to grow our constituency more than threefold. There are 98,000 people now spread around the country and the world who are active and involved with the Adirondack Council. That makes us stronger, better able to protect, but I see lots of potential for us to further grow, expand that constituency. It's good to do, plus it will enable us all together to better preserve the Adirondacks, this legacy for the future. I went over, I apologize. I'm just so appreciative of all your support, and I say thank you on behalf of all the staff. And I also want to say thank you to the board and to the staff, to our former staff, to our emeriti. None of us could do this by ourselves. We do it together. Diane, thank you for all your service too.
Thank you, Willie. One of our members, Paul Dangler, said that he really liked this option and hopes we can do it again. It's been great to participate in the meeting. So thank you, Paul. And we'll turn it back over to Michael to close out the meeting. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Diane. Thank you, Willie. I now declare this meeting adjourned. We'll hope to see you in person next year on Saturday, July 10th, 2021 at Great Camp Sagamore in Racket Lake. The meeting is over, but the screen will show a few photos you and others have shared from your pre-call outings in nature. Stay safe, savor the beauty of the Adirondacks. Thank you for your involvement and thank you for your support.
Thank you, thank you. Members, supporters, partners, you were great. Thank you, Michael, for your leadership as board chair.
Thank you, Michael. Thanks, everybody.